Well, good morning and welcome to this Cambridge Marketing College webinar. My name is Neil Wilkins. I'm going to be talking today about content strategy and planning across channels. Have you ever kind of had that feeling that you're just publishing content? You're just pushing stuff out there through socials and probably your website, maybe through email, etc. And you kind of stop and pause and think, why am I doing this? Well, this is going to be the webinar that will hopefully once and for all sort that issue out. Because we're going to look at how to plan, create, distribute, and measure content that actually works across the full customer journey. Many of us are getting kind of just lost in the chaos of publishing for publishing's sake, posting for posting's sake. So what we're going to do today is really reflect on if your current content is actually planned and being part of a connected system, or is it just a series of separate channel tasks, things that you do because you feel like you should? So I'd just like you to kind of reflect just for a moment when you've published content recently, or maybe you're part of a team that's publishing content, how much actual thought and detail goes into the why? Are you actually pausing and thinking about why are we doing this? What's the actual commercial reason? How is this actually going to help our brand develop? How's our customer actually going to feel as they engage with our content? Or are you just publishing? Because I think for many of us, and I will look in the mirror and reflect on this myself, we do find we get caught in this content trap. So we're publishing for publishing's sake, and that's really not helpful to anyone. Content is absolutely central now to everything that we do, literally in marketing communications. I mean, it's central to search, to social, email, enabling sales, the whole customer experience, if you like, certainly visibility within AI, and also this broader kind of opportunity of building brand trust. And the problem isn't actually that we're producing content, we're producing a load of content. I mean, you know it because you've got timelines, you know it because you've got social accounts, so you're seeing brands doing this. But often there is a lack of direction. And this is literally from startups and micro businesses all the way through to big corporate international brands. We're all doing this in a way that can be improved. So this is a time to kind of stop and reflect. Is our content strategy and planning working across all the channels that we're communicating through? Because we need to be operating from a clearly defined audience, profitable activity that drives commercial value, and not just publishing for its own sake, not just posting because we need to. So this is about really kind of mindfully communicating through all of our marketing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of, as we go through this session, I'm going to pitch it at two levels, really. So if you're working at a tactical level, so you're actually in the delivery side of things. So you could be a content creator, marketing exec, and you're actually publishing stuff. Then this is hopefully going to be helpful for you to create useful assets and thinking around real audience needs. So you're driving real value in the stuff you publish. If you're more at a management level, you're more kind of marketing leadership, we're going to be looking at this from a more strategic focus. So building a content system that really directly aligns with the goals that you have in marketing and then further up to your commercial goals. Now, of course, if you want to take a broader view, you can look at both strategic and tactical. And I would certainly be encouraging everyone to do that. But if you're short of time, just focus on the area that's kind of most useful for you on a day-to-day basis. So the things that we're going to cover as we go through this session, hopefully by the end of this, you'll understand all of this, is going to be building content plans from objectives, not just habits. Okay, it's a very easy little trap to fall into that, but we're going to build content plans from what you need to be doing and why, not just because you can. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the why rather than just the what. We're going to match content to audience needs and various stages of the customer experience or the customer journey. This is crucial. I think a lot of us, and I do this too. So, I'm not just preaching and saying I don't do this and I'm perfect. A lot of us do this. We have a piece of content and we just push it out there because time is tight and we think, well, it's okay this time. We'll just push it out there because, it's good stuff. We want to share this and it's positive. Whereas actually, a lot of the time, it may not be appropriate for the channel or the point at which the customer or the particular end audience is actually receiving it in their journey of engagement with you. So it could be just positioned at the wrong time in their experience that they have with your brand. So we'll look at that. We're We're going to look at choosing channels more intentionally. This is really key. I mean, a lot of the time, just because we can publish to every channel doesn't mean that we should. Sometimes we'll be pushing an email out and forgetting about socials, and that's the best thing to do, and vice versa, for example. So it isn't all about just flooding the market, flooding all of our channels with content and thinking we're doing a good job. This is about intentionally doing things. So it may be that you actually need and will get better value from doing less. And that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because that could free up time and resource and energy and maybe even budget if you can actually get this right. And there is a Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, that I will talk about because that's key. We're going to look at repurposing content without becoming repetitive. So we know that we can sort of clip and, create shorts from long form, etc., etc. So we're going to look at this about in a way to kind of still add a lot of value, but be super efficient in what we do. So it's about being smart here. And we're going to look to protect quality and consistency. There's a few little rules here that we need to be, very diligent around our brand guidelines and the things like that. But also, really importantly here, we're going to be measuring content by contribution, the value that it actually brings, not the noise that it creates. And you could argue the business doesn't care whether you get engagements and likes and reach and this, that, and the other. What they want to know is, did it actually provide a commercial value? So that's going to be our starting point. Because when we think about content strategy, it isn't really about deciding what to post next Tuesday. A lot of us have got content schedules, we've got a content plan, we know the subjects, we know the campaigns we've got coming up, we know the events and the products, and then we start to just create content around those things. But that's not content strategy. It really isn't. If you stop and think about it, actually, a content strategy is something at a higher level. It's a higher level plan that guides intentional creation and maintenance of an information flow from your organization, from your business, around your brands to an audience. That's what it is at a higher level. It isn't the next post. It is something that's a lot more strategic and meaningful. It is a bigger picture thing, and you might think, oh, well, I'm not really involved in that. But you need to be. You need to understand what is the higher level reasoning behind the stuff that we are publishing and pushing out there. HubSpot themselves, actually, one of the platforms that a lot of us will be using, describe content strategy as a series of kind of steps. So planning, creation, publication, management, and governance of content. So this is about being really thoughtful and actually not just putting a social post out there because you can, not just sending that email because, well, we haven't sent one for a week, so we need to send one out and, oh, there we go. Everybody's going to be happy. This is actually about being really thoughtful about the value that that kind of activity is bringing. So the key point here is that content strategy must, and this is a really, really key thing, it must connect your audience needs, your business goals, the channels you're using, some kind of workflow and system to manage all of this, and crucially, measurement as well. Because to do less, but the higher value less, is better than just doing more. Okay, it's a simple, simple equation. And really what it does, it starts with commercial purpose. So before even thinking about your campaigns and before even thinking about which channels are we going to be, kind of looking at because they're the places where the customers are, or maybe we're looking to target prospects and break into a new market. Whatever those things are, we need to start with commercial purpose. So before planning the content itself, there are a few questions you need to ask really, which is what business goal are we supporting in our broader communications? Which audience are we trying to influence? Not get to buy or anything like that. It's which audience are we trying to influence? Because if we can influence them, their thinking, their emotions, their behaviors, then we stand a chance of actually doing something for them and with them. Next question is what decision, belief, or behavior needs to change? Because unless somebody actually changes their behavior, and particularly if they've never really engaged with you before, then you are just talking to a brick wall. You really are. You're not talking to a human. So we need to encourage and enhance them. And this is a higher level engagement strategy. It's not just content. This is an engagement strategy. And we need to also understand what does success look like? Because, for us in marketing, a lot of the time we feel really buoyed if we kind of get a few more followers or if we get a big piece of engagement and lots of conversation going on a particular post. But if that doesn't lead anywhere, then what was the point? We were just being busy. That's not smart, commercially valuable content strategy. It's just noise, it's just activity. And a lot of us do that time and time again and think we're performing well. The business does not think you're performing well. In fact, actually, that's spending resource. It's not the investment of our time, which we'll come on to in a little bit, because that's key. That's how the business wants you to be active, active in and consistently building good habits in. And the final bit of this planning content from a commercial perspective is what content already exists. Because there may well be some stuff that's actually performed really well. But until we know that, until we know what's worked and what hasn't, so we need to do some kind of audit because most of us aren't in absolutely brand new startups. We're in established businesses of whatever length of years. And so we've got stuff that we've communicated before. So we need to understand what worked and what didn't and the why. Again, it comes back to that question, the why. So, from a tactical perspective, it's knowing the purpose of each asset that you have. And from a strategic perspective, it's ensuring that the content program supports growth, retention, reputation, or demand creation, whatever the forces are coming through from the business, whatever things the business needs support with, that's where our commercial purpose starts. Okay, so it isn't just about making noise. It isn't just about, oh, brand awareness. Oh, that phrase, it really, really riles me because it is just so loose, it's so woolly, and it's of no help to anyone. We need to move beyond that. Yes, of course, we want some awareness of our brand, but we need to do it in a commercially valuable way rather than just some kind of woolly, oh, people know about us. Oh, what value was that? Okay, it's a starting point, but we need to go deeper. Now, when you start that, you will probably be aware there are many frameworks, many ways that you can start to structure your content planning. So you can actually put those questions, the answers to those questions into some kind of framework. And, one that I always go to first, my first point of call is Paul Smith's SOSTAC. So this is the framework that you can do from a strategic perspective, or you can do it for a campaign perspective. But when we look at content planning, the S in SOSTAC, the first S is situation. What do we know? The O is objectives. What must content achieve? What are those goals, those SMART goals for our content? The second S is strategy. Who are we targeting and how? Strategically, not just down at a tactical day-to-day level, but strategically. Who are we targeting? Who is going to help us develop our business if they engage with us? From a tactical perspective, the T in SOSTAC for tactics is which content, channels, and formats are we going to be using? The A for action is who creates, approves, and publishes this content. So we're getting down into the kind of the detail, that granular level now. And the C for control is how will we measure and improve? And I'm just going to introduce this little idea on that control bit. It isn't just about measuring how the marketing did or how the content performed. Okay, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting into our heads the fact that if we've spent budget or if we've committed time, that's resource that the business could allocate elsewhere. In other words, we're having a commitment here. This is not a cost, it needs to be an investment. Okay, so we're not spending budget, we're not spending time. If we're doing this properly, I want you to kind of think about this from the perspective of we're investing budget and we're investing time because the mindset then changes. It just that simple word of spend or invest changes how you think about this. If you're investing in something, it's very different to spending. If you spend, it's gone. You're not expecting a return. But if you invest in something, you expect a return. So if you invest in the stock market, you invest in some shares, or you put your money in a building society, you're investing and you expect to get more out than you put in. Well, that's the same here. So as you're building content strategy and planning across channels, think investment. I need to put something in here in terms of time, energy, budget, effort, resources, basically. But then if I'm investing rather than spending my time, spending my budget, if I'm investing, my mindset is I need to get a return. And that is key. And that's a language that the business will celebrate and reward you for. Okay. It's a very different mindset, but just one word can change everything. So the key point here is that putting it into a structure like SOSTAC stops content planning become ideas first, strategy later. It starts from your strategy, but it means that everything you're planning is an investment. It's not a spend. So when people say, oh, I'm going to spend some budget in that, that's wrong, isn't it? You can just hear it now. It just feels wrong. But if I'm going to invest some budget in there, it's like, oh, okay. So we're going to see a positive return. The business wants to hear that. That's a game changer for many businesses, and I see this a lot. Just that turn of the narrative can change everything. So then the next kind of step, and this is obviously going to be an important one, is the audience understanding then comes first. Okay, strong content planning begins with audience insight. And you kind of know this. I mean, a lot of businesses will be talking about, customer first or, we're marketing or market driven. It's kind of, yeah, obviously it's built into the way and the framework of doing good marketing, but a lot of businesses don't. They're talking about themselves. They're talking about their new product launch. They're talking about, please come to our event. And of course, that isn't understanding the customer first. So you've got to really ask the questions. Who are they? What are they trying to achieve? What do they already know? What do they misunderstand? What pressures or barriers do they face? In other words, what pain points are you trying to solve? And then what proof would help them move forward? So this is really looking at it from the customer's lens. It's not about building a content strategy on what you want to say. It's about building it from what your customers want to hear from you. Again, it's just a little nuance, it's just a little shift in perspective, but it changes everything. It enables you then to do stuff that customers actually want to hear rather than actually just talking about yourself. Now, they don't mind a little bit of that, but it gets a little bit tiresome. It gets a little bit boring when it's all about you. So it's about listening first. And you know this, and I know this, but often we've got a message to say, and that clouds everything about really understanding the customer. We kind of lose sight that it's more about them than it is about us. So that's really important. And then we've got a useful strategic model, STP, segmentation, targeting, and positioning. Again, another little tool to kind of add into the mix here. From a segmentation perspective, it's which groups have different needs. In other words, can we break down those overarching audience or customer needs into little segments? Because they will have different needs, and we know that. Not every customer is the same. I know we're all looking now for this hyper personalization for everyone, but this is kind of at a higher level before we get to that. This is about understanding, are there certain groups or segments who kind of look and act and behave differently because they have different needs? And if they are, well, let's put them in a segment and then we can serve them appropriately. And there might be a different group over there. Because, of course, the different channels that serve those segments will be different. The content will be different. So, again, it makes logical sense when you pause and think about it. From a targeting perspective, the T in STP, it's which audience segments matter most. Now, this is the first visiting of this Pareto principle, this 80-20 rule, because 80% of the value you're going to get from your content marketing is going to come from 20% of the audience. 80% of the sales you're going to get are going to come from 20% of your customers. Whatever form you put that 80-20 rule in, it just works. It's almost like magic. It's a magic kind of formula. And I'll guarantee it'll work. It's worked for decades since it was first established about 100 or so years ago by an Italian economist called Pareto, believe it or not. And this 80-20 rule is really, really important because it means that if you can identify when you're targeting in your content strategy, even before you start to plan your channels, if you can identify which audience segments matter most, you can then obviously do the 80-20 rule and then just focus on the 20% because you're going to get 80% of the return from them anyway. So suddenly you've become super efficient, and that is important because then the positioning cuts in. The P in STP is what should they believe about us? And from a tactical perspective, obviously that means you can adapt the messages to them so that they believe and they build some faith around, the messages that you have so they begin to trust you. And if you can do that with examples and break that down in terms of testimonials, then more the better. And from a strategic focus, this is avoiding trying to make one content plan serve everyone equally. So we're going to see different shades. We're going to see different tone of voice maybe within your brand guidelines, but we're going to see different stories, different examples for different segments. Now, ultimately, obviously, we want to get down to a segment of one where we can hyper personalize for each and everybody. But for most of us, a good starting point to get this right is to begin at a higher level segmentation. So maybe even splitting your audience in half is a good start, and then maybe start to drill down from there. Because what you can then do, having selected your priority audience using the 80/20 rule, is to then map content to their customer journey. Not the overarching customer journey that's all about you and what you're trying to plot, but actually their reality, their journey through your products and services, your website, the events, the interactions that they have, maybe the sales visit, maybe their call to customer support, etc., etc. And you can then plan content around the various stages of the customer journey. And of course, this then goes one little step further, the different channels that serve those different stages of the customer journey. So the journey is going to be built around various stages. And we know this, if you've looked already into the whole concept of customer journey, I'm sure many of you have. The idea here is that we're looking to sort of, hook them in with problem recognition. So they've got a need that they want to serve. This particular segment has got a particular issue going on. There might be some friction, or there might be issues in their life or in their work that we can help them solve. Then they're going to be researching, they're going to be looking for ways to solve that challenge and that issue. And that's maybe then we can start to get on their radar. They're going to be doing comparisons. Part of their journey is that they're not just looking at us. We might think we're the best thing since sliced bread, and oh, we're the most professional business. We've got the best products. But then everybody says that. So they're making a comparison between you and your competitors. They're then going to take a decision. And of course, if that decision comes from the fact that you, and they're going to decide to go with you because you have really understood their needs, you've made it almost irresistible to work with you because you're frictionless, you're high value, you've been really focused on listening to their pain points and understanding them. You've got great examples where you've served people just like them before. Then the content that they've been picking up will help them to make the decision to run with you. And this is B2C and B2B. It's the same kind of thoughtful process. Then they go through the purchase or inquiry. So they've committed. And so what we've got then is we've converted them from being a prospect, somebody who might buy from us, into being a paying customer, or they've signed a contract, or, they've clicked the buy button on the website, whatever your conversion point is. Then we move into the later stages of the content journey, or the customer journey, as it's going to be from their perspective, which is then onboarding. So we've got to get them in, we've got to serve them, we've got to get them that product, and we've got to follow up afterwards. Then we want the retention stage to be an incredibly immersive and beautiful experience for them. That retention stage is really important. We're building loyalty there. So we've moved beyond the faith and trust of getting that conversion, and we're moving into the retention stage. Because ultimately, what we want is advocacy. We want them to feel so good that they are then recommending to others just like them. Of course, most of us engage with people who are like us. It's kind of a human nature thing. So that brings others then into their own customer journeys, starting at the beginning. So we're building this kind of really interesting cycle. And if what we can do in these different moments of the journey is put different styles of content, maybe use different channels, and match those things at those different points in the journey, because we understand what the customer's going through and don't just publish generic content at every stage, then actually what we're doing is we're becoming a lot more relevant. We're becoming a lot more kind of friendly, I guess you could say, to the customer. And what happens then is they feel like we get them. They feel like we really understand them. And then we've got their attention. And then we can do more with that relationship as it builds. And really, what we're doing here is we're matching the content to intent. So, useful content jobs include educating them, reassuring them, maybe challenging them, allowing them to compare, demonstrating value, converting them seamlessly, supporting them at every point in this journey, and then retaining them. So, an example would be a product comparison guide. You think about that, that's a nice one because it helps guide consideration. Because, they're not going to just choose you, they are going to consider the options. Then a customer case study reduces risk. It does because if they feel confident that, oh, it's not just me, somebody just like me, and they got great value. Oh, look at that. Brilliant. Okay, take me to the next stage. They're not probably going to buy from that, but it will take them to the next stage. An onboarding email reduces friction because once they got it, they're justifying to themselves that it was a good purchase decision. So if we can then hold their hand through that stage just after purchase, we're going to reduce the friction of them saying, oh, I don't know, I'm going to send it back, or oh, I'm not so sure that was a good call. Of course it was. It was brilliant. You're now working with us. You're part of our community. How can we help? So that kind of content can really, really help at that stage. And a thought leadership piece may reframe the problem. It may help them to think, oh, it isn't just about the product or service I bought. I actually really like this brand. They really get me. And actually, they're really helping me to see that that solution wasn't actually as bad at all. So I've got this product or service, and what else can they provide me with? What other value can I get from this brand? This is what we're trying to do. So think for a minute, about what content jobs might be missing from your current plan. I mean, that's a useful little list because in essence, really, at some point in the customer journey, those content jobs, those roles that content have, should probably be there for everybody, for all the brands, all the marketers that are serving customers. We need to educate and reassure and challenge and compare, demonstrate, convert, support and retain. We all do, no matter what industry we're serving, no matter what our segment definitions are. Those are content intentions that are really, really important. And from those, then, we can start to build what we call content pillars. And the content pillars really kind of combine and get the kind of the story in a good kind of narrative, if you like, and they give us an opportunity to sort of build a story over time. An example pillar, say, for a B2B consultancy is market change, performance improvement, risk reduction, implementation guidance, and leadership confidence. So a useful pillar might combine something like the audience need with a business relevance, a discovery or search opportunity, selling the brand expertise, and then providing the commercial value. So we've got to think, what is our content kind of actually saying? Because these pillars help us and the audience to stop chasing random topics. A customer doesn't really care. Let's be honest. Customer doesn't really care you've got this new product to launch. They don't really care that you've just upgraded your service. They don't really care that you've got a new member of staff. And yet we spend a lot of time putting into social media and putting onto our websites stuff that's all about us. Whereas actually the content pillars start to align it with, yeah, but what's in it for me? Because if we can start to more focus on what's in it for me, we can put those things in as part of a bit bigger, kind of better, more effective customer focused narrative than just talking about ourselves. And what we're also going to be doing is potentially then starting to see topics clustering. And this enables us to become deeper on particular themes or particular core assets that we want to put forward. We might decide there's a particular theme or topic that we want to be identified with. Yeah, you know what this is called. It's called thought leadership. That's the other kind of phrase for it. But this is kind of topic clustering. It manifests in thought leadership because, if you want to become I don't know, the organization in your industry that's most aligned with the rollout of AI in the kinds of services and products that you develop. I'm kind of making this up as I'm speaking, but let's just take that as a kind of a common thread to some of the topics that you might be talking about. If you can then cluster those topics and make a very timely, almost a series of published articles or a series of sort of webinars or a series of podcasts or a series of social media posts that actually show that you're clustering these things because they're high value and because they're important, it will build authority around themes that support your positioning, but also help the audience, your customers, your targets to understand, okay, this is actually what this organization is about. And I buy into that because that's something that's on my mind too. That's what we want these topic clusters to do. It's to enable the right kinds of customers to kind of almost glue themselves to you and your brand. And so, from a tactical perspective, it creates connected assets. There's almost a reason for publishing because you've got a series that you're developing and posting rather than just these isolated posts because they land, people look at them and go, nah, whatever. And that's not a good reaction that we want. But if it's like, oh, there's version 3 of this series. Okay. Oh, I missed the first two, but this looks interesting. Let me see if I can trace back and find the other two. Oh, I can see where they're going with this. This is good. I'm going to follow this. I'm going to engage. That's the kind of reaction that we want. And then what we're going to see is that the channel choices will follow those kinds of reactions because if we can see more traction from these content clusters and in these content pillars, we can then start to think about, well, which channels are going to be the best to serve those kinds of messages to this segment that we're focused on because they are the priority segment that enables us to then spend a lot more focus, i.e., invest our time in the places that are going to give us the best return. So rather than starting with, oh, we need more TikTok, unless the audience and objectives actually justify it, that may well not be the right thing. You know, the world is talking about TikTok, the world is talking about Instagram. Oh, we've all got to be on Instagram. But the big question here is, well, do we? Is that the best place? Is that the best channel to serve where you are now in your answers to the questions I've posed to you? Because if the answer is, well, actually, no, it's LinkedIn. Or if the answer is no, we've got to set up a podcast. Or no, the answer is actually we need to run a webinar series and some follow-up events. Then those are different answers that help you to create some really valuable differentiation from the rest of the market who are actually chasing the likes and the reach and stuff in these kind of media channels, and they could be wasting an awful lot of time and energy. They might look busy, but that is not a reason for doing it. And at this point, what we've done is we've started to get really, really focused and targeted in where the real value comes from. And then it enables us to sort of balance our channel thinking because then we can decide, okay, which of these channels are going to be paid? Which ones are we going to really be focusing for earned content? And which ones are we going to be looking at shared? Which ones are we going to be looking for owned content? And so we can start to balance here a really great way of producing content, enabling these channel choices to kind of join up. And so a strong plan doesn't actually rely on one channel doing every job, but it puts certain channels, whether they are going to be used as paid, earned, shared, or owned, into certain points in the customer's journey. And that customer's journey is for that segment alone. And we might do this and replicate this again with another segment, and we'll develop another customer journey for them. And so what we're doing is we're doing less. We are absolutely doing less. We're not saying we've got to do all of this by far. In a way, is that's the opposite of what we're saying. We're saying, okay, so if we're going to do some paid, if we're going to do some ads or some sponsored content or maybe some paid social, which channels will that perform best in? And we might have to do some testing. We might not have the data yet. So we're going to start small and we're going to experiment. But now we know which target audiences we're going after because we've segmented them. Now we know which channels we're going to choose and we know our topic clusters that we're going to be putting in there. And we're going to be following those topic clusters rather than just posting here, there, and everywhere. We're starting to get a bit more control. And so, what we might choose to do, and particularly if this is early days in terms of proper strategic content planning and channel planning, we might decide actually we're going to try each one of these, maybe in turn, because we don't have the time or kind of bandwidth to be able to do them all at once and watch everything. But maybe we'll try one at a time and we'll see what happens. We'll actually measure from a commercial perspective and we'll see where we got most value. So not just kind of the vanity metrics I was talking about before, but actual outcomes. How did we help more people get to the next stage in the customer journey? How did we unblock those little bottlenecks in the customer journey where people just stopped when they got to a certain point and we never saw anybody go any deeper into the journey because it just wasn't relevant to them? If we can spot those little points and maybe test and play and test and play and just get better and better and better, then we're going to really start to learn which channels, which content, which segments are actually going to perform best. And so what we're doing here is we're starting to plan content by role, not just the format. So a webinar, for example, if we're trying to build thought leadership, is not automatically a strategic thing. And a social post isn't automatically tactical. So what we need to do is actually ask what role the content is playing before we actually press publish or before we set up that webinar series. We need to be playing it back to those original questions we asked and say, well, okay, we've got the opportunity to do this. We can publish this article or do that webinar, maybe record that podcast, but this is the why. Now we've got this framework of segments, customer journeys for those segments, different channel choices, different things we can do with the content and the different types of content. Now we can start to ask these real questions. What role is this content going to play? Awareness builder, trust builder, lead generator, sales support, customer support, retention tool, authority builder. The list will go on, and you can obviously make sure that that is translated for what you're looking to achieve on your side. But these are kind of content roles, if you like. So every piece of content, in fact, every thing that you publish or do should have a job description. It should be there almost as a little friend of yours who goes out into the big wide world and actually does some stuff, and you give it some rules and give it a brief, and then it comes back to you and says, hey, I was out there and this is what I've managed to achieve. Because that's then the investment on that activity. And of course, it isn't actually like a real person, but just kind of it's an analogy, giving it a job description that just makes it work harder. It gives it a really clear performance role, if you like, in your overall marketing communications. And that's important. This goes way beyond just publishing and just hoping. This is actually really thoughtful stuff that takes a little bit of time. And what it means is then that we can, if we're being thoughtful, work with the stuff that's really, really working. So we can repurpose intelligently. Repurposing is not copy and paste with a new thumbnail. Okay, it isn't just, oh, we've got long form, so let's click that up and we've got some short form. What it is basically it's looking and seeing what happens and then actually testing the short form versions or the adaptations of that long form thing, be it a webinar, a report, a white paper, case study, article, whatever it happens to be, and then watching those short form versions of it and how they perform. Because one or two of those things could be your absolute nugget of gold. It could be that suddenly, actually, by doing a social post for this webinar, and we've actually done 3 or 4 of these little webinar clips in short form, in particular social networks, and maybe it was YouTube, maybe it was Instagram, maybe it was on LinkedIn or wherever, and we found that those two perform better than everything else. They absolutely outperform everything else, not just in terms of engagement and hits, but in terms of how we took somebody on a customer journey to the next stage. And then another channel picked up, and then we took them to the next stage. And then another channel picked up with a different piece of content, different style to take them to the next stage. So the repurposing of what we're doing then is more than just breaking stuff down into little chunks and then publishing. It's actually helping the customer to really understand the value of moving to the next stage in the journey. And so what we're doing is actually creating this kind of sort of, this simple, really content mix, if you like, of hero, hub, and help. So the hero stuff is the big campaign moments, those big things, those things that you're super proud of. It is a product that you know is going to provide value, or it is a webinar series, or it is an event or a conference that you want the customer to engage with and come and see you. It's those big campaign moments, those flagship ideas and launches. The hub then is the regular editorial content that keeps the audience engaged. It's the clusters. It's those things that enable them to think, okay, there are your content themes. I'm still interested. I haven't booked onto that webinar or I haven't committed to coming to that event, but I will because you're being consistent. So I get what you're doing. It's those things that then are the hub of what you're doing to keep the customer engaged. And then the help is the practical answers. Because if they're still engaged, there's something in what you're saying or doing that is helping them to solve a problem. So the practical answers are their recurring questions and needs. You haven't actually solved them yet because they haven't actually bought or committed or attended the event or watched the webinar. But if you can keep them on the hook long enough that they understand that, this is going to be a solution if you commit to this, then what you're doing is you are providing a really, really good channel for them to stay engaged. So, from a tactical perspective, you then know what type of content you're creating that's adding value. And from a strategic perspective, you're balancing the visibility, the consistency, and the usefulness of stuff by consistently and constantly watching. It's a really, really helpful way of actually, ensuring that this stuff is actually hitting the point and hitting the mark as you go. And so what we're finding here is that, I'm creating more stuff for you to do basically. So what we need to do here is say, okay, that may be a series of activities and a set of kind of guidelines and principles and some foundations, part of which we're kind of doing, but we haven't really aligned it. So what I would be saying now is, okay, so how can AI then start to support you, because we're all going to jump straight to AI for a little bit of support at this point, aren't we? In terms of clarifying everything that we've been saying, all the decisions, and kind of getting a nice little plan together, maybe starting to put some neater content out under these pillars or clusters. We're going to go there. So AI, I would say at this point, then, if it's going to help you, is going to help you with your content operations, but not the fundamentals of what we've just said. So I would be saying this is quality time. You might have AI kind of as part of the conversation if you're in a team meeting or you're trying to plan this yourself. It can be there in the background, maybe steering and maybe clarifying stuff, maybe putting, a whole sort of brain dump of ideas into a more clear kind of format. But the ideas need to come from you. These are the fundamentals. But AI can then support you with synthesizing the research, with creating maybe deeper ideas and thinking, obviously drafting, repurposing, and personalizing, blah, 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 all the kind of content audits and editing. We know it can do that. But think of it as supporting the operations rather than the overall strategy. So it can accelerate the rollout once you've briefed it on your thinking, but your human strategy still needs to decide what deserves to exist. So deciding that this is our core segment, that's you. Okay. Deciding here are our content pillars because I know we're going to be looking at serving this particular customer with this kind of style of service or product. So I want to strategically join this stuff up. That's you. Making the decision about which channels are we going to test first and the ownership of the overall customer journey. That's you. All of the operations that support that at the next level in terms of how you join these things together, that can be AI supported and driven by you. So it's mostly human, but it's also a little bit of hybrid working as well. And the hybrid comes really into play, and the AI really comes into play when we're looking to measure content properly. So what I would recommend is that you start to brief your AI in terms of helping you at this point, having briefed them with the strategy, which we've already set there, and start to say, right, we need to avoid relying on things like likes, impressions, post volumes, content role, etc., awareness, qualified reach, blah, 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 blah. All those kind of things. Now we can go a lot deeper. Okay, we can go a lot deeper and more kind of commercial with what we're doing. And the key point is here is measuring stuff and getting insights from stuff that relate to the job the content was created to do. Remember that job description that we've set for a channel, and we've also set it for the content that's going to be published. It's measuring against that. It's not just measuring the metrics. Okay, so for consideration stage of the customer journey, it's going to be things like engaged visits, repeat visits, and downloads, the actual behaviors. At the conversion level, it's going to be inquiries, leads, purchase, and applications, depending on obviously what your conversion point is. Going to make it, mean something to you and your business. But it's the commitment of the customer. Have they committed? There's a commercial value to them committing. If they haven't, that's just marketing hot air. The retention stage is repeat use, support reduction, renewals, those kind of really tangible business things that relate to your marketing. That's far more interesting than, oh, did somebody then do a repeat kind of view? Did they sign up or follow us on, whatever social platform? That means nothing to the business. Business doesn't care. That might be what you have to do, but it's not the thing to be measuring. It could be a KPI, but it's not an objective. And of course, the authority, we're not just looking at short-term quick wins. The authority is the longer-term brand building from doing this stuff right. So that's things like backlinks to your content, that's mentions, citations. It's a load of things that actually have real commercial brand value So what you're doing today is actually going to be helping into the future. And those are the ways that you can obviously get AI to really support you, turning the data that you see from the content role into actual insights that can help inform what you need to do more of, how you can actually refine that 80/20 Pareto choices that you've made, how you can start to maybe change the channels if one or two channels in the customer journey aren't working. Get the AI's insights because it can go way deeper than you as a human can do. And that's a really, really clear way to get your AI on side so it understands the process and it understands the journey that you're on. Because we are all on a journey. None of us have got perfect marketing communications. None of us, nobody on the planet has ever done that. So there's always room for improvement. So our practical planning workflow here, because we need to kind of sort of round this off with, some ways of actually kind of taking this in a practical sense. So there's a step-by-step process really that we've identified here, which is defining the business objective, not marketing, the business objective. Why are we here? What are we trying to do? Identifying the priority audience. That's that segment that I was talking about in the whole kind of overarching sort of, possibilities of people you could target. Who's the priority audience? Who's the priority segment? Mapping the journey stage with the content and the channels that you're actually focusing on. Choose the job description for the content, not the actual content itself, but what is the job description for the content you're putting out? Select the strongest format, choose the right channel or channels. Again, you can decide on that. Define the call to action, the CTA, absolutely critical because you won't get a behavior change. You won't get them moving to the next stage in the journey unless you're super clear about where they need to go. Make it easy for them to do that frictionless journey, remember. Agree ownership and workflow. That's a more internal thing, but who's going to own this thing? Who's going to drive this thing? And if it is with AI, make sure that it's a hybrid working because you need to learn hand in hand with your AI. This is not just let them get on with it. They can, but you're not going to learn if you're sort of distant to that. Publish and distribute. Obviously, yes, appropriate times, all the usual kind of posting rules apply. But then critically with your AI, measure, learn, and improve. And that's the continuous journey that we need to be focused on here. So that's a really, really important way to look at it. So again, as a practicality, the thing that you could do is choose one upcoming campaign or content theme. Okay, so you can kind of go through this, just kind of work your way through these steps. So what is the business objective for it? Business objective, not marketing, business objective. Who's the target audience? What's the main audience need? Before you even start thinking, yeah, we're going to launch this thing or do this campaign, what's the main audience need you're addressing? At what stage of the journey are you actually focusing this campaign? Is it awareness building? Is it conversion? Is it retention? You've got to decide that, otherwise it's generic and we miss the point. What's the core message? And again, within that, you're looking at kind of what's your unique selling point? What is the thing that is going to be really valuable to the customer? Again, it's all about them, not you. So your core message is not your message, it's how you want it to be perceived by the customer. What's the core content pillar? So is there this kind of this pillar that you're going to focus in on? And again, that's where that word thought leadership comes into play, or words thought leadership come into play. What's the primary asset that you're working with here? Again, you can translate that into what's meaningful for you. And what are the repurposed assets that can come from that primary asset? So it could be a webinar, could be a podcast, could be a white paper, some research you've done, whatever it happens to be. What can you repurpose from that that's meaningful? Which channels or channel are you going to be pushing this out through? And what is the call to action? And for most, it isn't about the call to action is, oh, buy this product or, you know, submit and commit to this kind of thing. It is actually about move to the next stage in the journey. So until you've plotted out that customer journey, the CTA could be a bit misleading. And that's where a lot of bottlenecks happen. And most people then don't click is because, whoa, you're trying to take me too far into the journey here, but take me one step further. And now I could be interested in doing that because you provided value to get me to that next stage. So your call to action is probably just one step in the journey. So plot the journey so you know what that would be. And then what are the success measures? And I'd ask you to reflect really is what would you stop producing if you planned in this way? I think we've kind of justified that this stuff is important enough. Remember, I've said this is about investing in your content, investing in your channels, not spending. And spending is budget and spending is time. And if you've always kind of done it in that way of spending, if you've always done it in that way of kind of not really thinking it through, then what would you stop doing if you knew that this was a better way? Not just for the business, but from your customer's perspective, because they'll get it. They'll understand it. They'll see that this is so much more about them. So if you were able to do it this way, what would you stop doing as of today? And it might be, hey, I'd actually stop doing everything in the way that we're doing it because we've been getting it so wrong. And for a lot of us, and I would say a lot of the work that I do with my clients actually is about stopping them from doing the old ways, and hoping that we can actually sort of create some much nicer habits, some much more effectively commercial habits. That is what it's about. So it is being honest. It's being really honest and opening up and saying, okay, there are gaps in the way that we currently do it. But if I was to do it with one upcoming campaign or content theme, let's play it through. Let's see if this works. We've got to adapt this kind of framework for us, for our business, because we're not as simple as this framework might suggest. We are kind of quite complex. But if I could break it down in this way, it would stop us doing this, this, and this, and we might be able to gain that and that and that. That's what we're looking to do here. It's this whole idea of really continuous improvement that is so, so important. So, as we wrap this up, I would suggest then the key takeaways from this talk have been that content strategy across channels is not about being everywhere. I think you kind of would certainly agree with me, I hope, by this point. I mean, it is much more about being useful, distinctive, and consistent in the places that help shape your customers' understanding and their best action. You know, we always have to do things with best intent. Responsible marketing is very much about actually putting customer first in a responsible and authentic and ethical way. And this is actually doing it really honestly and transparently. It's really helping them to build a relationship with us. That's so key. And if you're a marketing exec, the task is very much to create better content with clearer purpose, not just publish because you can, but actually be publishing to provide more value to both you and delivering the marketing strategy. And if you're a marketing manager responsible for the strategy, the task is to build a connected system of audience insight, so listening to what then happens, building some channels that are really appropriate and being confident enough to say, we're not going to go down that channel anymore. One, because it doesn't really perform, but two, because actually it doesn't fit with our strategy now. So our strategy for content and planning across our channels says we need to be here, here, and here. And then the governance and the measurement, constantly watching, building those insights out, using AI to go deeper into actually what is happening from a commercial perspective, will then enable you then to develop content plans that make every channel work harder because every channel and every piece of content knows its job. So putting this kind of little analogy, or it's kind of a metaphor, I never know which one it is, but it's either an analogy or metaphor, of actually giving the job descriptions to your channels, telling them what their role is in the process, in that part of, for that particular customer, that particular target segment. This is your role, channel X, and piece of content Y. This is your role. This is your job description. So go out into the big wide world, do your thing, come back and report how that went. And if it doesn't work perfectly, as it probably won't, then we'll learn together with the help of AI, and then we'll be able to continuously improve. So maybe it's about thinking of your channels and your content clusters or your content topics as being kind of little assistants for you that go out and help you get your message to the right customers at the right time, at the right place in their journey, so that magic happens, so that we get more people over the line engaging with us and we can then sell more value to them in the long term. And for me, that really is a simple little process, but it is something that takes time. So you're going to be investing and reflecting and working on this if you really, really commit to it. But it is really the way now that businesses that are growing, businesses that are outperforming their competition, are actually looking to build content strategy and planning appropriately across all of their channels. So I hope you found that useful. It's a lot to do, a lot to think about. So go back, reflect, but see if you can translate some of that stuff into the things that you're going to be doing in your upcoming campaigns and marketing communications. I wish you every success. Hopefully, that will be useful and productive for you. But the underlying thing here is that our content strategy and planning is all about the commercial value, not just hitting the marketing targets. And if you do that, we become so much more relevant to the rest of the organization and, yeah, achieving our marketing goals.